Paramount announced a fourth Friday the 13th at the end of 1983, producer Frank Mancuso Jr. was feeling the critical backlash against slasher films, and Friday the 13th in particular. He decided it was time to kill off Jason once and for all.
When we got done with 3, I was like, okay, what I want to do now is I really want to bring this thing to an effective close.
With the departure of Steve Miner, Mancuso and investor Phil Scuderi set their sights on finding a new director. Their search led them to Joseph Zito, who had impressed Scuderi with his 1981 slasher film, The Prowler. With an early draft of the script written by the late Bruce Hidemi Seikow, the filmmakers set out to make the best and final chapter.
The people at Paramount said this to me. They weren't going to do any more films. This was the last. So I knew that it would be bookended with a dead Jason and another dead Jason, at the end.
We'll do some things that refer to our past.
Jason's out there.
We'll bring this thing to its rightful conclusion. And we'll be done.
So the idea for the last movie, which we thought the final chapter was just to resurrect Jason one more time and then kill him in a way where the film grammar said he's really dead.
I wanted to pick it up exactly where Friday 3 left off, that he was on the ground, just exactly where you had left him.
We craned down on a bunch of police cars arriving, a helicopter has a searchlight, gives you kind of a big budget feel and a very dramatic opening.
I held off Jason coming to life for a long time in the film.
The audience is continuously on edge through these kind of languorous, elegant shots. When is Jason gonna reawaken?
The audience certainly is not going to believe he's dead, but they become co-conspirators in bringing him to life. They start yelling at the screen for him to get up. So it's instead of groaning that he gets up too soon and they say, oh, this is fake, they make him get up.
As Jason is put into the freezer, we see a little puff of air, so we get the first hint that Jason is not dead.
Once again, the producers chose to recast the role of Jason, this time turning to a rough-trade Hollywood veteran to don the hockey mask.
Regarding the actor to play Jason, I wanted to go with a really experienced Hollywood stuntman. And Ted White was he had double famous, Hollywood actors, was an older guy, way older, twice the age, almost 3 times the age of some of the kids he was killing.
I actually turned it down to begin with, and later on I did accept it. After I accepted it, I did go down and rent 2 of the Jasons, and I watched Jason itself, how he moved and so forth. And I felt that I'd like to play him a little bit different. I'd like for him to move a little bit different. I didn't want that slow motion routine anymore. And I thought if this is the final chapter, then that's the way I'd like to take it out.
He has a sense of dramatic timing that other Jasons, maybe didn't think about in the same way because they didn't have 40 years experience of being before the camera.
There was a nurse there that I'm supposed to strangle. And when I shoved her up against the wall, she had a button on the back of her cap. And when her head hit the wall, the button kind of penetrated her head just a little bit. And she yelled out. These are the times when you back off and say, you're not really Jason, you're just doing a thing here. You're supposed to be making a few bucks and not hurt anybody.
No, this is not a guy who was waiting his whole life. He's not a fan of Friday the 13th, someone who's waiting for the opportunity to be in Friday the 13th. It's a guy who came to work and had to put a mask on, and had to put fake teeth in that made him drool, and was embarrassed by the entire thing, was happy that you couldn't see his face.
The job of creating the film's bloody makeup effects initially went to future Oscar winner Greg Cannom. But when Cannom left the project due to personality differences, director Joe Zito called upon the one man who could rightfully be called Jason's father.
It's almost like I'm Dr. Frankenstein. I created the monster. Thank you for letting me kill the monster, which I did.
Tom Savini did a wonderful job, I thought, of makeup. And that was a 4.5-hour makeup job every morning.
I actually replaced a makeup artist on the final chapter. And luckily, that's what they were doing. They were designing the adult Jason from my makeup design on the kid, which is only logical, I would think, So I was glad they were doing it, but I had nothing to do with the design, They did a very good job.
It's funny that in all of our conversations about Jason coming back to life, nobody ever used the word zombie, ever. We never heard it. We knew you couldn't exactly kill him, and he would always be coming back to life. So it's sort of like he just wouldn't die.
After escaping from the morgue, Jason returns to his familiar sleigh ground at Crystal Lake, where he quickly sets his sights on the Jarvis family, a recently divorced mother, a pretty yet reserved teenage daughter, and a very special boy named Tommy. I remember walking into the casting office and going, Friday the 13th? I thought this was for Halloween. And they were like, no, it's Friday the 13th. And I was like, oh, right, of course, I knew that.
Corey walked in there and he was so alive and so friendly. And he and I we clicked.
I went, I did my audition. And then at the end of it, I remember my mom telling me, like, okay, they really liked you a lot, but they have some concerns. And I said, what are the concerns? And she said, well, they just think you're too small. And, you know, it's not very believable that this little tiny kid is going to pick up the machete and, you know, whack the hell out of this 6'5" bad guy. And I went, give me a machete. Let's give it a shot. And I think that was the end of it.
You could see with Corey. You really could. This young man was going to skyrocket.
And I remember it was a very big deal because Gremlins and Friday were both coming out pretty much over the same summer, within a couple weeks of each other, from what I remember. So that was very exciting as a kid to have these two giant blockbusters coming out.
I think Kimberly and Corey and I got along well because they're just nice people.
I did a lot of work about the parents being divorced and that I was going to protect my brother, that I would take care of him emotionally, and that, we were going to make it as a family without my dad.
My parents are separated. Middle-aged crazies.
And I do remember her doing a lot of kind of looking after me, making sure that I was taken care of. She was kind of the person that I think I could probably relate to most.
I at least felt that it was a real connection. As much as I could bring to that role, I wanted to bring to it.
There was thought about making the surviving characters outsiders. So Trish isn't really one of the guys. She's an outsider. She's not ready to become part of the party, or the party doesn't want her. Tommy's an outsider, like Jason. Tommy's a kid that doesn't fit in.
I argue that one of the reasons Tommy Jarvis has been as popular as he's been is because that was a very relatable character to the core audience of these movies that they could very easily see themselves in, and ultimately sort of the challenges that he has, the kind of outsider kid who's a little bit freaky, he's got hobbies that maybe not everybody approves of per se.
At a roadside cemetery, the gravesite of Mrs. Voorhees and her first name are revealed for the first time ever.
Found out her name was Pamela, I guess, about 10 years after I did the film. I didn't know.
Of course, we were aware, putting a mother character in the film, that fans who knew part one would think about that.
That idea of Joe giving me a hint that maybe I should look sinister when I looked out the window because of the mother being the one that did the killing in one of the other movies never occurred to me. Never occurred to Joe, I don't think, or he certainly didn't tell me that.
We didn't play it hard, and we didn't try to suggest that she was going to be a villain, but she does make a judgment on these kids, and it feels like these kids are going to bring trouble and bad stuff onto my kids. And of course, she's completely right.
With the events of the final chapter picking up directly after part 2 and 3, fans have pointed out a number of holes in the series' continuity and timeline.
My character, Rob, had a sister named Sandra, who was a counselor at Crystal Lake in part 2, I think.
Sister Sandra was just a really great kid.
But the man that killed your sister is dead.
We butt up against Friday 3 in chronology, yet Rob is doing some stuff that he hasn't been doing since just a couple of days ago. But when I read it, I did not connect that character with someone who had died the same day or the day before or a few days before. So I assumed Rob had been searching for a longer time than it turns out he was actually searching.
What are you hunting for up here?
Bear. Anybody up at the lake today?
You can't be hunting for bear.
Zito said he didn't want to invent really cool new ways to kill kids, although we eventually did. He said, all I want you to do is make real kids that look like real kids, and whatever we do to them will be horrifying.
It would be nice to make them so likable that you were sorry when they got killed.
I want the kids to be a little more real, and took a lot of pain casting for that.
It was not an easy piece to bring in the names. That's not what Friday the 13th was about. I got lucky.
The people who were really the stars were Peter Barton, who had just come off a series called Powers of Matthew Starr, and the other one was Lawrence Monason, who had starred in The Last American Virgin.
I've been lucky in the sense that I've had certain roles throughout my career, part of these legacy franchises, and this is certainly one of them. And it's nice to be a little part of a big thing.
Arguably, one of the most memorable victims in the Friday the 13th series was Crispin Glover's sex-starved yet hopelessly insecure Jimmy. The film marked the beginning of a long career for the young artist, who became known for his wildly eccentric behavior, both on and off camera.
Crispin Glover and I had a love fest. I adored him. He was the most unique young man that you couldn't pigeonhole him at all.
On the set, he was always the oddball. He was always the one that kept to himself. He was always the one that was kind of like in his own little world. He's an eccentric, he's mysterious, but he just walks to the beat of a different drum.
Crispin and I actually worked really hard on our characters and the relationship, and we both loved improv.
He thinks that's funny. He thinks it's a funny thing he's doing.
And that stuff in the back of the van when we're all driving, and I'm typing on the beer cans and the dead fuck lines.
It says you're a dead fuck. A dead fuck?
Crispin and I made all that up, and they just let us have fun with it.
The two of them together really had a great thing going, a really good rapport.
I think you should run that through your little computer.
And they were pretty good buddies on that set. And it showed a relationship. I think that's so important in these films to have that.
In one of the film's more memorable sequences, Jimmy decides to bust out his dance moves.
I don't remember what song Crispin was really dancing to. I just know that he was dancing really crazy, in the way that only Crispin could be. And it was just fun. It was just really fun and funny.
That's slightly the weirdest thing about our roles, which were supposed to be these sexy girls who are sort of coming, to join in with this other group of people, and all the boys are madly attracted to us, and we're dressed in these ghastly clothes.
Well, what about our hair as well? Our hair put up in sort of little librarian buns.
Yeah.
I mean,
and the pants seemed to be too big. Everything was sort of just big and bulky and very unsexy.
Yeah, I wouldn't bonk either of us.
The twins. They were the Doublemint twins, and they were loads of fun.
The biggest thing for me was boobies. I was an 11-year-old boy. I'm like, I get to do scenes with boobies. Not much has changed.
I have to say, the skinny dipping was very equal, because when we were shooting it, we obviously, as girls, had to have no tops on. But then the boys go, we'll do it with no bottoms on as well. And there they are, swinging off ropes. So, it's kind of... It was a cute group to work with, that's for sure.
At the time, I was the kid who was like always wanting to get up in everybody's business. I was like, hey, let's all go out. Let's go do something. What do you mean you're all going to town without me? Why can't I come too? I mean, I really wanted to be a part of that group.
The first day was Halloween, actually. And I took him trick-or-treating.
And we went out in the street, and this street was like a festival of guys in Jason's masks. So ironic that we were there actually creating this stuff, and then this group of people were actually out there having a great time with it.
I think everybody was very sweet to Corey Feldman.
I remember getting along with everybody on that set. The only person that I didn't get along with or was afraid of was Ted White.
Mean little devil. I couldn't stand him. I wanted to kill him desperately. There were times when Corey got close to me that it took all my reserves to not just reach out and grab him and give him a good spanking.
Ted was very respectful when it came to the fact that I was a kid, and he knew to keep his boundaries. But at the same time, I don't think that he was really very aware of how to deal with children.
Well, I was a child actor, so I had a lot in common with him. It's a hard thing. You miss a lot of your childhood.
You could see there was a dark side to Corey. Not bad, but wanting to stay with the actors as opposed to getting in the car and going home to the so-called real life that he was living. Frank Mancuso Jr. was quite helpful keeping him together and happy. Even after the movies. You know, Frank, we all stayed in touch with Corey.
As with Part 3, the filmmakers chose rural areas of Southern California to stand in for the fictional New Jersey enclave of Crystal Lake.
We shot in 3 different places. Franklin Canyon in Beverly Hills, north of Santa Barbara in a place called Zaca Lake, and in Topanga Canyon.
The Jarvis house would later be featured in such films as Eraser, My Girl 2, and episodes of the HBO series Entourage. But for the cast of the final chapter, working on the set presented a number of physical challenges.
And we're at the house where we shot the movie. Tommy's room was up there on the second floor. Yeah, the kids' house is over here, right?
The kids' house was right over here. We built the kids' house, the house where they have the parties, and the house where they get killed, right over here. It was my idea, and I don't mind telling you the studio objected a lot, to have the houses in real proximity. See, the thing is, when we built this other house, it was an expensive thing to do, building a house as opposed to finding 2 houses. But we really loved the Jarvis house. I really loved the Jarvis house, and I really pushed for it. So the studio agreed to build this other house here. But the thing is that we had a design for it where it was a really good house to shoot in, a big house. But as they started doing the numbers and analyzing the numbers, the house got smaller and smaller. So in the end, it wasn't the great house to shoot in, but it was a cool-looking house.
The young people we had in the cast were some of the greatest kids that I've ever worked with, and I've worked with a lot of young kids in the business. But what they went through to make this movie was unbelievable.
Shooting the movie was pretty horrible because it was raining the whole time, and it was freezing cold because it was dead winter.
I didn't read the script when I got the job, and I didn't read that the last 40 pages of the script said night rain.
What the hell are you doing here? What are you trying to do? Kill me?
What I remember the most about those steps right there is that for continuity's sake, at the end of the movie, I had to be wet because it was raining all the time. So in 35-degree weather, I was hosed down with water from a tank that was sitting outside in 35-degree weather.
Just unbelievable what they went through for the amount of money they were making.
It was a trial in a good way. I felt like a Marine after it was over.
Once again, the real stars of this Friday the 13th were the elaborate death sequences designed by effects wonderkind Tom Savini.
I had done a movie called The Prowler. It was mostly a lot of special effects, really good Tom Savini special effects.
I think that's what audience came to see. How is the next guy going to get it? So that's what it was about. And it was almost like the latest exhibit from your favorite makeup artist magician. How is Jason going to kill these kids?
So we spent a lot of time talking about how to kill people in interesting ways. And that's the number one thing you do with Savini, because it's his favorite thing in the world to do, is talk about how to kill things.
This just kind of crazy mind that was always creating.
It was a terrific honor to work with Tom, and especially to be a part of one of his last great effects films.
The choice of name for the character of the kid Tommy was a little homage to Tom Savini, who contributed so much to these pictures.
I was really kind of fascinated with the process of how this was all going to be put together at some point. And so I used to hang out in Tom's trailer all the time and watch them do the rehearsals for the different effects.
The kids would come up to us. How am I going to die? How am I going to die? The juicier and grosser it was, the more they loved it, you know.
And even the kills that had conventional things, because we had seen in Friday the 13th blade coming through the throat before, right from the first one. So we gave the girl a banana.
I love bananas.
It's sort of a comedic kill in a way, and a comedic character, but it's awful anyway. I mean, the blade comes through her neck, but you're sort of watching her squish the banana.
I never really met Ted White, who played Jason. Tom Savini stood in for him because you only see Jason from the waist down. He's the one that grabbed my head. He's the one that pulled the knife down. And the direction he gave me was, okay, now this is a real knife. You're not going to get hurt. Don't fight me. Just let me move your head where it needs to be. That was the scariest thing of the whole shoot for me. The way the thing worked, I had a track around my neck with a flexible steel blade that pushed from the back, and then a false neck over it, which took hours to put on it. And it also had a little tube for blood to squirt. So there were like 3 people behind me, laying down behind the sleeping bags in my gear to work the entire thing. It was such a messy little death.
We did full-on special effects that were extended and bloodletting and actually terrific. I mean, the one of Judy Aronson when she's killed in the boat with the knife coming through her body. I mean, the original cut on that was really totally cool. I mean, it was extended. It was horrible to watch because you really believed she was dying in there and in pain for an extended period of time.
Sam, Judy Aronson, thank God I didn't get that role, because what she had to go through, but, all naked on a raft and then just, it's just very vulnerable, kind of almost quasi-sexual. Even now, as I watch it, I just think, ooh, God.
Shooting my death scene was a bit of a challenge. That's where the horror part came into the filming for me. What they did was they made a fake body. There was a raft with a hole cut in it, and my body went through the hole. I was upright in the water, and from here up, I was just leaning over.
I think this was in January, and it was around midnight, and it was either 22 or 23 degrees. It was very, very cold.
And we were all standing there bundled up, gloves, boots.
It was very, very cold, and the water was even colder. It was hours and hours in the water. And it became really difficult for me. There were points where I just felt like I couldn't go on anymore. I was shivering so badly.
She was freezing. She was so cold, her teeth were chattering, and she asked to get out, and they were reloading the camera. And the director said no.
They said, no, we have to finish. We have to finish. We did everything to hold back from crying, and I don't think I was successful.
This girl was actually turning blue, and I went to Joe Zito and told him, I said, Joe, we got to get her out of there before she freezes up completely. And he said, why don't you just do Jason and I'll do the direct. So that's when I got a little upset with him, and I said, well, either get her out or I'll walk, one or the other. So they pulled her out.
They took me into a trailer and heated me up and got me back out there, and it was great. I warmed up, thawed out, basically. Joe,
of course, was not trying to be mean. He was trying to get a film made. Whether he was going a little too far with somebody else's feelings, I would say yes.
And it turns out that I had gotten hypothermia, and I was quite sick for several days after that.
The other gruesome one really is, Sam being killed in the boat, naked, and then her boyfriend coming out and getting it in the crotch.
When you're looking, for your girlfriend in a lake and you think she's probably naked, you do not want to get speared in the crotch. That is a bad thing to happen at that moment. The guys certainly feel that one when they watch it.
Pretty much all the deaths were pretty graphic and grisly, but you don't see the mother die.
In most of the Jason movies, I think there is no parental supervision. In ours, there was, because we thought that made it scarier, especially when the parents were made to disappear.
In filming that scene where you see me come in from the rain and you see me turn around in the shock, there was no other murder and mayhem that you could put on the screen. That was it, that one point.
Although Mrs. Jarvis's death was only implied, a deleted scene involving Trish's discovering her mother's corpse was originally intended to be the film's final jump scare.
But I do remember that we shot a scene of her in the bathtub, all made up like a cadaver.
Kimberly comes in, she sees water dripping down, and she goes upstairs and opens the bathroom door, and you see me under the water in the bathtub, dead.
It was really intense, that scene, and I was surprised that they left it out, but I guess it was disturbing and they didn't want it in there.
It was excised almost immediately. I didn't want to dwell on it. I didn't think it was good psychologically to make more of that than we did.
The main thing about my death scene was really the sort of atmosphere. It was the flashing of the lightning and the thunder and the feeling of it being very scary out there. They put a big light behind me so that I'm silhouetted against the side of the house. And at that moment, the pitchfork goes through me and I get flung against the wall. That is not me. I'm just the shadow.
Kristen does a whole thing where he's so happy about being successful with this girl in bed.
I think you're incredible.
You're incredible. Which is what I say in bed to Crispin when he's like, am I?
We say it
fuck.
That was quite funny.
People talk a lot about the corkscrew that gets Crispin Glover.
Hey, Ted, where the hell's corkscrew?
He's calling for a corkscrew and wham, right through his hand. The corkscrew nails him. Jason's clever. He nails him with the corkscrew and then machete to the face.
I thought that was really creative, and it came out of left field.
I just had an idea that we shouldn't use a weapon at all in one of the kills with one of the twins. And just have this prolonged thing of her at the window, and the hands come through the glass, grab her and throw her out.
It was a pretty big stunt. I actually don't know when it's going to happen, but what I'm told is Jason's going to come, grab me, and at that point, the only thing I have to do is get my neck out of the window as it shatters. After I've done that, the stunt girl has to propel herself out of the window. That's her first shot.
And she landed on a car top. We blew the windows out at the same time. I thought that was a really neat stunt and was well done and well thought out.
I didn't suffer as much as other people did, really, in terms of coldness and wetness.
One of the first sequences to suffer the wrath of the MPAA was the death of the cocky yet ultimately rejected Ted, who was left alone to spend the night with a blue movie, a teddy bear, and a joint.
I remember in mine watching that sort of old-fashioned, semi-soft-core porn movie.
So the film breaks, the screen goes white, Lawrence stands in front of the screen, and a knife comes through the back, stabs him in the back of the head. We're not sure exactly what happens until we see the blood on the screen as he slides down.
I remember at first I had to go visit Tom Savini, and I went to get my head created.
Tom rigged up a knife that was cut away with a little pump that was pumping blood, and you just looked at the dailies, and it was just horrifying to watch.
I was a very young actor when I did this movie. I think I was 20 or something, and really committed, real. Everything had to be real. And so my character in the movie had to be stoned. And so I thought, wouldn't that be interesting to actually get stoned and see what's that like to actually be stoned on camera. I go to my trailer and I'm like, I'm smoking this joint. And I get stoned. And I'm a very paranoid stone person, so it was the worst idea I could have ever done. I was unable to comprehend what the director was saying, and I just was too paranoid to do anything. It was terrible.
Actor Peter Barton, who had previously starred with Linda Blair in Hell Night and Part 2's Amy Steele in the short-lived series The Powers of Matthew Starr, suffered perhaps one of the most brutal deaths in Friday the 13th history.
My hands were my weapon of choice. Once I got my hands on them, the killing was easy then.
I mean, he smashes, a pretty guy's face through the shower with his bare hand. Breaks his nose with his finger, blood comes out, and then smashes the head against the tiles.
Tom said to me, don't tear the head up. This is the only one we've got. And be very careful with it. Yet the director was just the opposite. He said, Ted, I want you to really be physical with this thing. That was the whole reason for having a stuntman in there, to be a little more physical. To me, that probably was my favorite kill.
To truly immerse himself in the role of Jason, Ted White took great pains to keep his fellow cast members at bay.
I think his way of keeping the character was kind of separating himself from everybody else.
I stayed away from the cast completely. I sat by myself on the set. I just stayed away from everybody, and I tried to keep in character as much as possible. I just felt that Jason should not be sitting there laughing and cutting up and kidding, and the next minute turn into this horrible killer.
As the night of murderous mayhem comes to a close, Trish and Rob are drawn into the empty house, and Jason claims his last, though bloodless, kill.
The he's killing me thing, that was something that I just reacted to viscerally as it was happening.
That's sort of why it wasn't necessary to do a big, bloody, gory kill, because it wasn't really about the kill. It was about the horror of hearing someone being killed.
They had the rig for this effect. They had the gardening tool with the blood spurting out. They had all that stuff done, but it was never used.
And when Rob is getting killed, Trish should get out of there, and then she does get out of there, and then she comes back.
Part of that was, I think, in the story making, was to get to the point where now you were left with a 12-year-old kid and Kimberly Beck, and that's all that was left alive.
The last part of it, we pretty much shot it in sequence.
The sequence involved Eric Anderson's character being thrown through the window. Jason comes and picks me up through the window and scares the hell out of me, which still to this day was the most terrifying thing I've ever shot in my life, ever. Terror struck across my face, my heart, my every nerve in my body was on end. And I literally was shaking and crying in terror. And I remember once we cut and that take was over, everybody took me outside. Are you okay? Are you okay? No, I'm not okay. I was not okay. And I was not okay for quite a while.
I enjoyed chasing the girl. I loved the screaming and all the hollering. All it did was invigorate me.
It was just grueling physically.
Well, the stopping and starting and the cat and mouse with the girl was not my idea or her idea. It was our director's idea, and he felt that that little play between us built up the suspense, and I think it did. Later on when I saw the film, I thought it added quite a bit to it.
You know, he wasn't brilliant and cunning, but he was smarter. He figured some things out in an Animal Plus way.
I never thought of her as being a heroine until, you actually watch the movie and you go, wow, she's kicking some ass.
But how are we going to get him in the end? Are we going to use silver bullets? Are we going to use garlic? Are we going to use a steak? Are we going to use any of the typical cliche ways to kill a bad man? No! We're going to use intelligence to outsmart him.
And of course, there's an obvious relationship between Tommy and Jason when Tommy takes on the persona and impersonates him to as a weapon to undo him.
Jason! I remember when I first heard this, I went, really? They're going to make me look like Jason? How's that going to work? The choice was made to not go the truthful, honest, dedicated actor way and actually go for it and shave my head. Instead, we were going to use Tom Savini's great illustrious makeup effects once again and put a bald cap on.
We talked about so many ways to kill Jason. There were so many death proposals. They came from everywhere. Of course, the producers would dream them up every night, but mostly Tom would come up with really cool ways to do it.
And we described this elaborate thing. Tommy, the effects kid, was also an amateur inventor, and he's taken a microwave oven apart, and put a reflector behind it with a variac that goes from 1 to 10. On 1, he melts a toy soldier. And we thought, why doesn't he, at the end, he jams this thing into Jason's head, turns it up to 10, cooks his head from within, and his head explodes.
And producers took it very seriously for a while. There were others. There were other things. But they were generally clever things that special effects guys can sort of laugh about and high-five each other for in the lab. But in the end, give the audience a distance from what really was happening.
I remember thinking, okay, I've really got to show how mean I can be, how tough I can be, that I'm this little kid, but I can kill this guy. I can do this.
Jason is about using a very simple weapon to do awful things. And it would be sort of nice if we just used a very simple weapon to do an awful thing to him.
A change was suggested to us that Jason's head be lopped off top down, not across the neck. In other words, cut open from the top to the chin like an artichoke. They suggested we didn't do that. And we thought, I think there's going to be a sequel here.
Maybe we're expecting something quick. Tommy hits him in the head with a blade, the end. No, he slides down the blade.
I came into the set with 101 fever that day. I was very sick. And it's the middle of the night, and you're already sick, and now you're sitting there using all of your energy to kill this giant man. And the fact that I was sick and the fact that I was so under the weather and I was really fighting just to be there at that moment, I think comes across in the look in my eyes. Because you can see the desperation in my eyes as I'm trying to take him down.
What happened with Friday 4 is that the Motion Picture Association of America was really on us.
And it was kind of a game where you would trim them down a little bit, send it back, trim them down a little bit, and they would wear you down and you would wear them down.
We would keep trading off frames of everybody else's kill scene so we could protect as much of Jason.
The kills were all there, but they were very fast. But when Jason finally got it, he 12'd on it. It made Jason's death more powerful.
This is the one. you've been screaming for.
Friday the 13th, the final chapter, debuted on April 13th, 1984. Although it still didn't win over any critics, the film went on to gross an impressive $32.9 million. As far as the filmmakers were concerned, they had done their job. Jason had left the screen on a high note and was gone for good. Or was he?
It really was this kind of renegade little group that was involved in major motion pictures that you know would knock off big movies. Clint Eastwood would do 7 and we'd do 9. I mean, and it would be like, you know, the people at Warner Bros. Were cursing us up and down. It's like, you know, those bastards with the $1 million movie beat us.
I remember in the New York Times, I think it was Janet Maslin, wrote like an angry review about the film. At least from this critic's point of view, it was actually kind of disturbing to see people that you actually did create some kind of relationship with, you know, meet their demise in the horrible ways that we all did.
We have fun reading reviews. We know what they're going to be like. And especially if someone gets, you know, particularly bitchy and clever, it's great. I mean, in a way, it's sort of like the Friday the 13th movie itself. If they're clever in the way they're trying to kill you, you cheer.
At the time, I was not really overly proud of making the film. You know, I was offered the 5th one and the 6th one. I could have done either one of them, and I turned them down. I'm sorry now that I did turn them down.
We all just wanted to make it as good as we could make it. We didn't want it to be campy and stupid, and as much as we could make it real and scary in that we would be feeling the real feelings. Everybody had the same goals.
We were already at that time talking about ways to further the franchise, elongate the franchise, bring my character back. And when we did the end scene in the hospital, to Joe and I, that was the nod. That was the way to kind of set up the next film.
But I thought, what a big win this would be. You know, as a new director, if I could make this thing live and become something that fans can appreciate again, and the studio is surprised and they go ahead and take it out and make more.
What we decided to do was make a statement about horror, that horror is contagious. The horror that Jason dispenses has been passed on to Tommy.
Maybe I was the next Jason. Maybe it was the final chapter of this Jason, but maybe part 5 was going to be Tommy comes to fruition, Tommy comes into his own as the next great serial killer. And that was really the setup for where the franchise was intended to go.
If somebody had pressed me at that time and said, how about 6 more movies? It would have been not the running Tommy Jarvis character, but this contagion of horror going from one person to the next.
And the look of Tommy in the end was, you know, wasn't an accident. I mean, that was something that was hoping to give birth to future Fridays.